Good evening, Rowan. It's the 18th of November 2016 and it's about 5 o'clock in the evening. And obviously this is my usual Friday evening video to reassure you I won't be seducing any priests over the weekend, so you can relax. Now I was going to today comment on the first lecture that you gave at the British Library at the beginning of October 2016, but you have actually been speaking at a Christian Aid event today, this very day, the 18th of November 2016, and there isn't yet any video or audio available of it, and I don't know if there ever will be, but people were tweeting out things that you said. So I'm going to comment on a few of these tweets. Now, I don't think that these tweets are verbatim, but I think they do represent what you say because several people were tweeting and some of the tweets did correspond with each other. So I think this is giving the impression of what you were saying, even where it's not quoted verbatim. So I'm just going to comment on these tweets now. So if you've been misrepresented here, blame the people who've been tweeting. Oh, this is a photo of you, by the way, today, so you're still your usual cheery self. So without further ado, I'm going to get on with the tweets. So here we have the first tweet. Crises don't read maps. There is no need in the world which doesn't impact on us. Partnership is vital. So I suppose this is promoting globalism again. Well, to be fair, Christian Aid is an international aid organisation. So you're kind of preaching to the converted there, aren't you, about giving assistance to people in the third world, mainly. Christian Aid mainly works with people in the third world. So, crises don't read maps. Well, that's true, I suppose, they don't, but when they arise, when a crisis arises, then people can deal with it, can't they? And some crises can be averted, can't they? Such as by not invading foreign countries and starting wars and wrecking the infrastructure that they've got there and that kind of thing. So sometimes it would be good if crises did read maps, or governments read maps and thought, hey, this foreign country a long way away has got nothing to do with us, perhaps we'd better not invade it. So it would be quite good to be reading maps then. And if some people need some assistance in a foreign country, then people are generally quite generous in giving donations to charities and things like that who may be able to help the people. So there's really no need for a one world government or the United Nations or the European Union or anything like that, is there? Simply because crises don't read maps. And as I've said, if we all did a bit more map reading and stopped invading foreign countries and setting up military bases in other parts of the world, which the United States does an awful lot, having military bases virtually everywhere. So if a lot more map reading went on, then there'd probably be far less crises in the first place. There is no need in the world which doesn't impact on us. Well, that simply isn't true. It's an impressionistic statement. It's complete and utter nonsense. If somebody needs something in the foothills of the Himalayas, or in some remote part of Africa, it doesn't actually impact on me at all, does it? Maybe I would get to know about this situation, and there may be some way in which I could help, but very often that wouldn't be the case, in fact. So to say there is no need in the world which doesn't impact on us is just complete and utter nonsense. You've just made it up. It's an impressionistic statement. And then partnership is vital. So I don't know what kind of partnership you're talking about here, because obviously I didn't hear the whole talk that you were giving. But if you're talking about partnership with me, it's never going to happen. So just get over it and move on. And I will be making some more personal comments in my comments on other tweets that you've made. So here's the second tweet I'm featuring here, and I'm just going to mention that there's another tweet which I'm not featuring, which refers to Brexit and Donald Trump in relation to the lecture that you were giving this morning, the talk that you were giving this morning. So this is the context in which I'm understanding this tweet here. The churches are more countercultural than for a very long time, were by definition international. So when I was an Anglican, a lot of people thought that the Church of England shouldn't be so countercultural, that it should be going along and be more progressive and going along with things that were happening in culture. So it was a very good thing to be going along with the culture for a lot of people when I was in the Church of England, and you were one of those people actually. You thought the Church of England should be going along with the culture, and particularly in relation to sexual ethics. And in fact, you did give a talk about that, which is a very celebrated talk called The Body's Grace. And this was to the lesbian and gay Christian movements in 1989. And I have talked about this before. I did a whole video about it, in fact. About the fact that you seem to be hysterical about your supposed fear that I may be a lesbian or I may want to seduce priests. So you were so hysterical about this, you had to run around all over the country and all over the world and interfere in every area of my life. Yet you were promoting this very permissive sexual ethic, can we say? I don't know if you could even call it an ethic, because it was so permissive. And in fact, one of the things that you said in this lecture, which I haven't looked up recently, is that you thought it was unreal and silly for people to say that you should only have sex in relationships and not have one-night stands. You didn't put it like that. You talked about transitory sexual encounters or something like that, and it was unreal and silly for people to think, well, you should only have sex in relationships. So you weren't even talking about marriage there, or heterosexual marriage, or anything like that. You were saying to these people you thought this was unrealistic and silly, yet for some mysterious reason it was a great tragedy that I just may be a lesbian, according to you. You just made all of this up anyway, which I've spoken about before. So my point is that you really thought that the Church of England, the Anglican Church, should be going along with culture in this respect, because this promotes the globalist agenda, the breaking down of the family and the making of people dependent on the state rather than dependent on their families and friends and people in the community. So this is the globalist agenda, to break down the family. So you're promoting that when you're promoting this very permissive sexual behaviour. And in case anyone thinks you changed your mind about this, this lecture was republished in 2003, which was a year after you were made Archbishop of Canterbury, and then it was republished again in 2009, which was the 20th anniversary edition. So you're obviously still supporting the things that you said in this lecture. So you thought and you think that the church should be going along with culture when it suits the globalist agenda and the things that you want. So here you're talking about Brexit, really, and Donald Trump's victory in the presidential election in the United States. So you don't think that the church should be going along with culture when people vote in a direction that you don't want them to vote in. So Britain leaving the European Union and Donald Trump wanting a less expansive American empire, let's put it that way, by not starting illegal wars, perhaps shutting down a few US bases and trying to stop so much illegal immigration into the United States. I've made a video about that already before anyway. So you don't think that the church should be going along with culture as long as the culture is resisting the globalist agenda. The church should really be going along with culture when the culture is promoting or accepting or going along with the globalist agenda. So that's the first thing I've got to say about that. And then when you talk about the church as being countercultural, where by definition international, well, the only sense in which the church is international because it's because people of any race or nation can become Christians, can become members of the church, and nobody is excluded from that. And the church, though, is the body of Christ on earth. This is how St. Paul described it. It's the body of people who believe in this faith and are trying to practice it as best they can. So Christianity is a system of belief and a way of life based on Christian ethics. It isn't a piece of land where only a limited number of people could live on it, or there's limited resources on that land. So the church isn't a geographical region which people can lay claim to and say, well, there isn't enough room or resources for these outsiders to come in. We can't afford to let so many outsiders in. And also, you know, the prosperity of our nation is actually based a great deal on our cultural values. And so we need to preserve them to some extent. And it's not going to be to the benefit of anybody if the culture is suddenly changed. It might actually be damaging not only to the people who are already living here, but to the people who come in as well. It's not going to help them if the society is eroded and the prosperity of the society is eroded by a lot of people coming in at once. It won't benefit the people who are coming in if the economy collapses or becomes weaker because of all of this. So nobody, in fact, benefits from mass migration and open borders and that kind of thing, particularly in places where the welfare state exists and existing taxpayers are having to pay more to support people who haven't paid into this system. So that's not really to the benefit of anybody to be allowing unlimited immigration from anywhere, even into prosperous societies. That won't help at all, and it won't even help the people who are coming in. So all your collectivist come by our bullshit is at best ignorant, and I think it's actually deliberately subversive. So the church isn't really international in the sense that it owns a piece of land and the people who live on it are Christians, and then it's decided whether other people can come in or anybody can come into this piece of land. It's not international in the same way that a global government would be, for example, because it's also a matter of personal choice whether you become a Christian or not. You don't have to become a Christian. So if we have a global government, then we're not going to be able to opt in and out of that, are we? And individuals can't opt in and opt out of the European Union. Only nation states can do that. So it's not the same thing at all, because people can join the church and they can leave the church. And it's not the same when you've got a government over one geographical area, or indeed over the whole world. So this is a false analogy that you're making here. The church isn't international in the same way that other international bodies are. We seem rapidly to be losing the notion that we all belong to one world. Well, when did we have this notion, Rowan? If you're talking about the globalist collective, when did we get this notion? Because I haven't got any notion that I belong to a globalist system, and I don't think that the majority of people do either, despite all the globalist indoctrination that we're constantly subjected to. So we seem rapidly to be losing the notion that we all belong to one world. Well, we all live on the same lump of rock that's hurling through space, and we can't avoid that. We can't vote to leave the world any more than we can vote to leave Europe. You're quite confused, as I've mentioned before, about the difference between the European Union and the landmass and peoples of Europe. So rapidly losing the notion. Well, where has this notion come from anyway? We're constantly bombarded with propaganda. We don't, in fact, belong to one world in the way that you want to imply that we do. And it's not all about taking care of people or the poor or people in poorer parts of the world or anything like that. It's about exterminating the lot of us and bringing in a dictatorial one world government. So we're not losing any notion. We never had the notion in the first place, despite the fact that perception managers and propagandists like you have been trying to foist it on us for decades at least. How do we convey the vision of one world in local communities? We start by standing together. Well, first of all, why do we want to convey the vision of one world in local communities? What relevance has it to the average person in a community, either here or in another country, as to what's going on in other parts of the world? Why do we want to be conveying this vision of one world? This is just promoting globalist propaganda, which is virtue signalling, and also presenting globalism as if it were a good thing, when in fact it's a bad thing. The political agenda that you're promoting anyway, which is globalism, is a very bad thing. It's a very bad thing for the vast majority of the people on the earth, wherever they happen to be living. So you say we start by standing together. So standing together in local communities. Well, you're not going to be standing together with me, Rowan, because as I've said, I'm not having anything to do with you. Not now, not ever. So get that idea right out of your head. We don't have a narrative of belonging in one world, or even in one nation or community. Well, I think you're referring to my last video where I was saying that I don't even really think of myself as British. I mean, obviously I am British and I feel more British in certain situations, as I've said before. And also I said that people in England tend to identify more with the region of England from which they come, giving Yorkshire as the example, which is where I'm from and where I'm living, that we have a kind of nationalistic attachment to Yorkshire, should I say. So we don't have a narrative of belonging in one world or even one nation or community. So I'm not even sure, in a more general sense, what this is supposed to mean. I mean, what difference does it make anyway? We don't have a narrative of belonging in one world. Well, we all live on the same piece of rock in different parts of it. It's quite a big rock, And it's not really natural for people to be thinking in terms of 7 billion people spaced out to some degree over this vast lump of rock that's hurling through space. This isn't how we're wired. It's actually contrary to human nature to think in this very expansive way. That doesn't mean you don't care about anybody in any other part of the world or in any other place. I mean, even thinking about the vast number of people there are in your own nation in a lot of instances, like 62 million people in Britain. That's a lot of people to be thinking about, really, and human beings are not really wired at an emotional level to be forming attachments to so many people. It's quite impossible, really. So what you need to do really is be considering your own moral actions as an individual, which I keep telling you over and over again, and the fact that you're so attached to this collectivist ideology because this enables you to abnegate personal responsibility. Your responsibility for your own personal attitudes and behaviour, which are very detrimental to other people and are entirely self-serving. So we don't have a narrative of belonging in one world or even in one nation or community. I'm not even too sure what that's supposed to mean. I mean, maybe it meant something in the context of everything else that you said, I don't know. But it's just quite an impressionistic statement, isn't it? And it falls to people like you, doesn't it? Propagandists for the New World Order to be trying to create these narratives to erode people's emotional ties to their own family members and their own community and pretend that people are being selfish if they're considering these things as a priority. When the reality is you're just trying to rob people of everything, aren't you? Not only here, but in other parts of the world as well. So it's just a lot of obfuscation and virtue signalling and mind control to be talking in this way. Politics getting traction. Our politics of borders. Roots up, walls up. What about belonging? Well, what about me belonging in St Michael's Church in Headingley then? Considering all the good work I was doing there, the activities I was involved in, all the friends I had there. What about me belonging there when you had me thrown out to try and force me to capitulate? And to become involved with David Pete and to say I'd made up or imagined him harassing me and masturbating in front of me with his hand in his pocket. What about me belonging then? What about me belonging in the Anglican Church and being treated fairly there when you were going around behind the scenes engineering all kinds of evil things to try and break me down? And destroy my faith and destroy me and force me to become involved with people I didn't want to be involved in. So what about my belonging then, Rowan? So it's all about belonging when you're telling people who they ought to belong with and what they ought to do. But when people are naturally belonging, if they're not going along with your agenda and giving you what you want, then you throw them out as punishment. And which is what I talked about in the last video, where you do in fact think that you're God. As I illustrated by some things that you were saying in your second lecture at the British Library at the beginning of October 2016. So it's all about belonging and you dictating who belongs where and how they ought to act and what they have to think and all this kind of thing. But when people are naturally belonging, you root them up and throw them out to punish them for not giving you what you want. What's the matter with us? Wonders Rowan Williams after political events of recent months reflecting turmoil and destruction. Another tweet has you saying, what's the matter with us as a human race? Well, as a human race, original sin is what's the matter with us, according to Christian doctrine. But as I've said about 1,000 times now, you don't need to be concerning yourself with what's the matter with other people, Rowan. What you need to be thinking about is what's the matter with you. Why are you such an evil man? Why do you do so many evil things? Why do you have to try and destroy other people? And why do you have to make empty political statements that don't cost you anything in order to make out that you're a moral and virtuous person? These are the things that you need to be thinking about, not what's the matter with us as a human race. And as a matter of fact, I think that the most moral decision for the human race, such as lives in Britain, was to leave the European Union. That was the most moral thing to do in that situation, and it is in fact immoral to promote the globalist agenda, which is what you do. It's not about global solidarity with all other human beings, it's about wiping us all out, as I've said many times already, and you're a part of this malevolent conspiracy to take over the entire world and exterminate the majority of people in it. So turmoil and destruction, well, that's going on in Iraq and Afghanistan, isn't it, following the wars there that resulted from your propaganda about 9/11. And there's turmoil and destruction in my life, and that's as a direct result of all the lies that you've told about me and all your evil behaviour, your self-interested, self-obsessed behaviour. So you go around creating turmoil and destruction, and then you pretend you're trying to save people from it. And I've talked on this theme many times, actually, the most recent time being in my last video, that you've got a messianic complex, and if people don't have any problems, then you create problems so you can then present yourself as the saviour. And you do actually quite literally think that you are God, as I demonstrated in my last video, looking at things that you were saying in your second lecture at the British Library at the beginning of October 2016. So stop thinking in the collective, Rowan, and start looking at yourself and dealing with your own issues. And stop thinking you can diagnose other people, because the only reason you want to diagnose other people is to make yourself feel superior anyway. And on the subject of you being God, Rowan, I would like to point out the rather obvious to most people, well, to everybody actually, you are not, in fact, God. People who believe in God don't believe that you're God. And people who don't believe in God don't believe that you're God either. So the only person who believes that you're God is you. So you're in a minority of one. Not that that makes a person wrong, being in a minority of one, but you're not God, Rowan. This is an objective fact. You are not God. You're a dysfunctional, inadequate little mummy's boy, and you need to grow up and stop pretending that you're superior to other people, because you're most certainly not. The notion of real solidarity is under threat. Fantasy that it is possible to be ourselves alone. Well, the notion of real solidarity was under threat when you were having me persecuted everywhere for decades, wasn't it? Where was your solidarity then? Why weren't you in solidarity with me instead of inciting people to treat me in an evil way? Where was your solidarity? In fact, you have no solidarity with anyone. You're entirely self-obsessed. You think the whole universe revolves around you. You think that you're God, and you think that the sole purpose of other people is to serve you, praise you, and to give you what you want. So where is your solidarity, Rowan? and the fantasy that it is possible to be ourselves alone. Well, you're living in a fantasy world, Rowan, as I've said many times. And I've also said many times that you tend to accuse other people of the things of which you're guilty yourself. So you're accusing other people of fantasy here, but in fact, you're the fantasist. You've had all these sexual fantasies about me, and I've shown an example of what I think is a sexual fantasy of yours when I was talking about the videos that you did about the Desert Fathers, which was about just over a year ago now, that you did these videos, and I commented on them quite recently. So you're having sexual fantasies about me, that I'm somehow desiring you, and that I somehow secretly want to be with you, and this is how it's all going to end. I'm going to come running back to you, and you're going to be kissing me up the arm, and this kind of thing, which was a fantasy you were outpouring in the programme that you did, Something Understood, which was broadcast on Radio 4 on Easter Sunday 2016. So you're the fantasist, and you've been trying to force me to act out your sexual fantasies and your other grandiose fantasies by putting me through this terrible ordeal that's been going on for a very long time. So I'm not fantasising that it's possible to be me alone, because I am me alone and I don't need you. I certainly don't need you. In fact, it would be beneficial to me if you didn't exist at all, considering all the trouble and trauma that you've had me put through for years and years and years. So I certainly don't need you. You're not beneficial to me. You're a malevolent influence. Your existence and behaviour and attitude is detrimental to me. So I do not need you at all. So get that thought right out of your head. You're living in La La Land. And you're also expressing your own psychological disturbance here, because you think that it's not possible to be yourself alone. And this is because you've got the psychological state of an infant. And the most terrifying thing for an infant is to be abandoned, because an infant can't survive by himself or by herself. So you psychologically are an infant, and this is why you've got this terror, this absolute terror of people abandoning you, because you think you're going to cease to exist and that you can't survive. Whereas in fact you are an adult, and you can survive. The world will not end if I don't give you what you want, and you're fixated in this psychological state that other people are not allowed to leave you. People have to give you what you want and what you think you need, otherwise you're going to cease to exist. And this is because you've got the psychological state of an infant. Well, I haven't got the psychological state of an infant, so I don't need you or anyone else in order to exist. I'm not going to cease to exist, even if nobody ever speaks to me again. So that's where you are, and this is your psychological disturbance that provokes comments like this. It's got nothing to do with any advanced philosophy or spiritual insight or psychological insight or anything like that. It's because you're an infant and you think you're going to cease to exist without this constant flow of affirmation and involvement from other people. Whom does our anger serve? So you're feeling a bit shaky, are you? Because you know I'm furious with you. And I'm generally furious about the situation that I'm in. So you're making another one of your self-serving, pseudo-moral statements, aren't you? Whom does our anger serve? I'm supposed to be reflecting over this and changing my attitude and giving you what you want, because the end goal of all your moralising And every decision you make in your life and everything that you say is that you get what you want, because there are no other considerations. Because you're God, aren't you? And the universe revolves around you. That's what you think, I mean. So just don't bother, Rowan. And my anger serves the truth. And if I have any issues with it, then there's a lot of priests in the Catholic Church I can talk to about it. I don't need to be reflecting over anything that you say, do I? Because I know what a completely self-obsessed person that you are, and everything you say, your pseudo-morality, your pseudo-spirituality, all of it is entirely self-serving. So don't even bother, I can see straight through you. And I'm going to say a bit more about that in a minute. So I finished talking about the tweets from today now, which is the 18th of November, and I'm now talking about this newspaper article about a lecture that you gave on the 10th of November 2016, where you were supposedly talking about Dietrich Bonhoeffer again. This was at a church in North London. So you're talking about global politics going mad and that you're struggling to see the sanity in global politics. It's not global politics that's going mad, Rowan, it's you that's mad. You are mad. Forget about global politics. You need to be sorting out your own insanity. And just because people don't do what you want them to doesn't mean they're mad. I mean, you've been saying this about me for decades, that I'm mad and bad, or at least I might be, when people were saying, well, she doesn't seem that mad and bad. Well, she might be. We've got to discern, we've got to check it out, we've got to test this and that. That's what you will have been saying, won't it? So, you do have this tendency to call other people mad and bad when they're not giving you what you want. So I'm talking about the last paragraph that you can see now. We've seen in the 1930s just how hard it was for the German churches to resist the will of the people, a phrase I'm starting to regard as demonic in its own way. The will of the people, this absolutised, amorphous popular view and prejudice which somehow takes away all need for discernment and questioning. So you're just conforming to type here again, aren't you, Rowan? Because you are God, you see, then anything which contradicts or resists what you want is demonic. Because this is how these things are defined, as I've said many times before. Virtue and morality are defined by you, who sees yourself as a Christ figure, as God. These things are defined as being the things that you want and that make you feel good. And so anything that opposes that or resists that is demonic. So this is how you're describing it. And when we talk about the will of the people here, I would like to point out that you are actually one of the people. So if you're talking about the will of the people as being demonic, then you're talking about yourself anyway, quite literally, aren't you? Because you are one of the people. You're not separate from the people. So the will of the people, this absolutised. Right, so this is quite interesting, isn't it? Because you're a relativist and you don't believe in absolute truth. But the simple fact is that absolute truth does actually exist. So that means that some things are true and other things are false. So there's no absolutising of anything because absolute truth exists in reality. So you, Rowan Williams, and many other postmodernists, bullshitters in other words, tend to relativise things, but nothing needs to be absolutised because the absolute truth already exists. And to put it plainly, you are wrong. Amorphous popular view. Well, I don't know what's amorphous about it. Amorphous popular view and prejudice. So this is the cultural Marxist extreme left-wing narrative that anybody who disagrees with you is racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, and has a lot of things wrong with them. And the reason that you all do this, and you particularly do this, is because you haven't got any arguments. And as I've said also about 1,000 times by now, if you've got anything that contradicts the fact that there's a malevolent globalist conspiracy to take over the whole world and exterminate anyone in it, everyone in it who's not them rather, then by all means present these facts. I would be delighted to be proved wrong. But of course you haven't got any facts, because everything I'm saying is true and I'm presenting evidence for it and arguing in a very reasoned way, and all you're doing is slandering your political opponents, and this is because you haven't got any arguments. So this takes away all need for discernment and questioning. Well, the thing is, Rowan, you see, I've been discerning these things, I've been researching them, I've found out the truth, and I've presented the truth and the evidence with reasoned arguments. So I've been doing all this discerning, and all you've been doing is lying and slandering me. And trying to force me to give you what you want, and telling me to commit suicide, and threatening that you're going to kill me, and all this kind of thing. So it's absolutely staggering, the total and utter bollocks that you continue to come out with. And you're just conforming to type. You talk nothing but shit. And anyone who opposes you or resists you or doesn't agree with you and won't give you what you want is either mad or bad. And you've gone so far as to call your political opponents demonic, which is quite ironic really, because as I've also said many times before, Jesus described Satan as a liar and the father of lies, and told the people he was criticising, you act according to your nature. And that Satan is a liar and the father of lies, and you do nothing but lie. And also you've sold your soul to Satan to get where you are, because you'd have never done it by your own efforts, because you're so incompetent, useless, arrogant and malevolent. So you're calling other people demonic. That's just hilarious.
You know the public will finish you. Is your brain really that miniature? You full of crap, give yourself an enema.
So this is my final comment now, and we're looking here at a saying of St. John of the Cross, one of his sayings of light and love, number 30, which I've also quoted in relation to you once before, at least once before in the videos that I've been making. El alma dura en su amor propio se endurece. So you've got the Spanish image there, because I've only got my mobile phone to work with at the moment. I haven't got a laptop here that I can use, and that was the best screenshot I could get. So that's why it's not the English up there. So what it means is the soul that's hardened with love of itself just becomes harder. It hardens itself even more. This is what the saying means. And so this is why I'm using it in relation to you, because all we've seen today in the information that's been tweeted, and also in this newspaper article that was written about a talk that you gave just over a week ago, it's all the same strategies of protecting your ego. You're extremely narcissistic, and as I've said many times before and made a whole video about it, you've got very highly developed strategies for evading and deflecting criticism. And the main thing that you do is that you malign the people who are criticising you, and you won't address the facts because you haven't got anything to substantiate your arguments. You've got no evidence, but you have to criticise, malign and destroy anyone who criticises you and doesn't give you what you want. So this is the purpose of me using this saying, that you just keep on doing the same things over and over again, and you've gradually become harder and more practiced in this technique over the years. And I'm talking about hardness of the soul here, that you're placing yourself further and further away from redemption all the time. Instead of turning to Christ and repenting of your sins, you're pretending that you don't have any sins and that it's other people who are wicked, deluded and bad, and they've got some agenda against you and they're bigoted, prejudiced, stupid and malevolent and demonic even, as you said, whereas in fact these words would more appropriately describe you. So I shall leave it there for this evening, but don't worry, I won't be seducing any priests over the weekend because obviously I'm still saving myself for my beloved, because he's so wonderful and we're made for each other, and I just can't wait to be in his arms, because I belong to him, you see, and I don't belong to you. I don't want anything to do with you. And I just can't wait to get my hands on those feet. I'm just so good at foot massages. I'm the best. So just think what you're missing out on. You're never having it. I'll never give it to you. I'm giving it all to him. So that's it for this evening. Then I've already got all these clips to glue together on YouTube. That'll probably take me forever, especially on my phone. But don't forget to be alert, because I will be turning up to make a citizen's arrest for terrorism. And don't forget to tip me the wink if you'd like me to kick you in the balls. That's if your mother didn't cut them off when you were a baby. Hasta la próxima.
You great, yeah, man, keep control.
Try to change me, you're wasting your time. Now I got something much better in mind. Robert De Niro's waiting, talking Italian. You bring me alive. He's a bad, bad boy. I'm a bad, bad girl. And we're getting back to
It's why Catholics have the best sex.
Adelante.